Hello everyone, this is PsienceWins and welcome to Let's Play Splatterhouse for the TG-16. Splatterhouse is not a game I originally grew up with. In fact, I'm more familiar with the second and third titles in the series because they were on the Sega Genesis. Whenever I'd go to Blockbuster as a young kid, I'd always look for this game and could never find it, and I just didn't understand that there was another system out there called the TurboGrafx-16 that even existed, because like most normal children, I had a Super Nintendo and a Genesis. It wasn't until years later I figured that out. The story to Splatterhouse is you and your girlfriend are parapsychology students at the university for degrees that don't exist, and you're going to go see the leading authority in parapsychology, Dr. West. Your girlfriend is kidnapped, you're thrown into a dungeon, and the Terror Mask comes to tell you that he can help you save her. I want to make note of this slide move here. The slide move will be used often throughout the game, and it's great because it does 2 points of damage to all enemies versus the normal 1 point of damage your punches and kicks do. Additionally, if you slide over an item, you'll immediately pick it up. The slide move in and of itself is actually relatively hard to pull off. It takes a little bit of practice. The idea is that if you jump in the air while moving in a direction, before you land, you want to press down the direction that you're landing in and the attack button, and you'll slide across the ground. I can pull it off 9 out of 10 times. I'm sure there'll be a few times during the playthrough that I'll mess it up itself. It's actually relatively simple to use once you get used to it. Most of the levels in Splatterhouse are pretty short. We're already at the first boss, which is the boar worms, which will just come out of the wall. I think the way you're supposed to work the fight, at least the developer's intention, is to memorize the pattern and go to each side of the room and punch them as they're coming out of the walls. And this is really good for points, but it's not necessary. Instead, what you can do is duck at the fireplace and just kick to either side that the boar worms are coming out of, and you'll immediately kill them. Most of the ones that you wouldn't kill will just jump over your head, so you won't have much issue here. Once the music stops, the fight's over, and you'll have one more surprise, and this is a common theme throughout the rest of the boss fights, where after you finish the boss, there'll be like a final scare, so to speak, very horror movie-esque. The second level ups the ante a little bit by introducing a new color enemy. The green enemies will take 2 hits to kill, unless you have a weapon. Weapons make everything a one-hit kill, basically. Weapons, much like your sidekick, do 2 points of damage, instead of just the one that your normal kicks and punches do. We'll also get one of our first projectiles, which is that wrench we just threw across the screen. Additionally, unlike the bile puked up from the enemies in the background, these hanging bodies that you break open like piñatas, the green goo that falls out of them will not hurt you, so feel free to run on it or run past it if you're trying to get through this area a little bit faster. You'll sometimes come across items like this that are in the foreground. Make sure you just press the up button, you'll easily pick it up. And the sewer level, which no good beat 'em up would be complete without a sewer level, contains a lot of the common elements you see in every other beat 'em up game. Some slight platforming, having to jump over or avoid spiked balls, and it's always a spike ball. Really, I feel like Turtles in Time ripped this off completely looking at it. Additionally, these water dead have a much longer reach than you. So if you don't have a weapon, or for some reason you get hit and you drop your weapon, make sure you jump kick them, because if you just try to punch them mano-a-mano, they will knock you out. Once out of the sewers, we'll come to the second boss fight of the game, which is the Poltergeist. Start by running to the right side of the room and watch for all the debris falling from the ceiling. This isn't a very hard fight once you know the pattern, but it's probably one of my hardest fights in the game, only because the flashing background makes me physically sick. When the chair comes to life, punch it into the corner, and then punch it steadily until it dies. If you go ham trying to attack it, it will jump on your head. And once the chair's down, you'll fight these 3 knives. Now the 3 knives take 3 hits each, and they'll come to life in separate little parts. They're pretty easy to avoid. I tend to stay on the right side of the room and try to position myself in a way that they'll run right into my fist. It takes a few tries. As you see, I struggle a little bit here, but it's probably one of the safer ways to fight these guys. The last knife's dead, the painting will come to life, and here I strongly suggest you just hammer on the attack button and face whatever direction the painting's at, and you should be fine. Make sure you're out of the way when the level ends, because that chandelier is a one-hit kill, and we'll move on to the woods. The woods level introduces us to the shotgun, which is really fun to use in general. Don't be afraid to use the shotgun, even though we will be using it to kill the boss. Just make sure that you save at least 2 cartridges. Another really cool thing about this level is these wolf enemies that appear from either side of the screen will start to eat the corpses of the zombie enemies that you killed if you don't attack them. Once you get to this bridge area, make sure you jump over these ectoplasm little puddle things that are running back and forth across it. If you do not, you'll be dragged into another water area where you'll have to just avoid some of those spiked balls and kill some more water dead. Additionally, in order to save ammunition, you can duck and kick to kill some of the green enemies. But again, don't be afraid. As you see, I have 3 shells left in this shotgun, and I used it for most of the enemies in the game. Now, this boss, the Biggie Man, like I said, takes 10 shots. If you push him to the far right of the screen with the shotgun, though, he will jump across the screen and attack you. So make sure you're not spamming the shotgun itself, but just going at an even pace. The 4th level doesn't have too much we haven't seen already. Make sure you avoid falling into the holes in the ground here. You'll come to another water area like the 2nd level had if you do fall into them. Additionally, we do have these jumping enemies, which I don't suggest trying to jump and kill yourself. They usually have a longer reach than you intend to kill you. Finally, we have this deformed baby thing crawling on the ground, which is the only time you'll see it in the game. And there's also another one that was in the 3rd level if you're playing the original arcade version. The new trap for this level are these spinning blades on the ground, which aren't very stressful to avoid. They're probably one of the easier traps in the game to get over. Really just wait for the blade to go around. Once it's on the other side, jump over it. You should avoid them completely. The 2nd set, you should be able to just run basically right across while jumping. Once we come to the mirror room, however, we come against one of the worst enemies in the game, the Evil Rick. If you can, I strongly recommend sliding into them like there, because it will kill them in one hit. Alternatively, if you're not great with the slide move, the moment they bust out the window, just turn around and punch them 2 times, then jump kick them. There is a slight pattern here where the Evil Ricks will come out of the 4th, 10th, and 14th mirrors. However, I have seen some variation of that where they'll come out the 3rd, 9th, and possibly the 16th mirror. Just be prepared. For the most part, as we were walking past the mirror, turn around very quick and be prepared to punch. You'll easily see them coming out of the mirror before they even have the chance to attack you. The boss fight of the 4th level is originally the Evil Cross and Nightmares. The Nightmares are the floating severed heads around the head at the moment. For the American release, they took out the inverted cross that was this boss and put in another severed head, so I guess it's really just Nightmares at this point. For this boss fight, I strongly recommend pressuring the boss himself. Run back and forth and make sure you're swinging at him. After about 6 hits, he should be dead, and the running back and forth helps disorient the flying heads that are coming at you so that they don't hit you as often. Another bit of strange censorship in this game are the archways that will appear in the background between these pillars. Additionally, there's normally a podium that you move up to right here, but instead we just have these floating candles. It's always been weird to me that they never remove the candles themselves. I understand removing the podium because of religious imagery that's on it, but the candles would just seem lazy not to take out also. The little day crescendo we just heard, I believe, is your girlfriend screaming for help, and luckily for her, we're about to go get her. Stage 5 starts off with a few of the chair enemies from the Poltergeist boss. There's 5 of them in the room, and they'll all die with one smack of this 2x4. So after you kill the 5th one, don't be afraid to just run across the room. The next room has these pits with these crawling hands inside of them, and the hands themselves are easy enough to avoid. Be careful when you are on the slanted planks of wood. You will slowly slide whatever direction they're facing. So just press the opposite direction if you're afraid you're going to go into the guts or the goo or the part of the house. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but part of the house is probably the correct answer here, and you'll understand why at the next level. If you'd like, take out some of the hands for a few extra points, and when you get to the end of the room, you'll have a decision to make, whether go up or down, and the rest of this area is basically a maze. Now, luckily there's no right or wrong answer to this maze. You'll just have to go through 3 separate rooms. I'm going to go up first to show off the flying ghost enemy and the painting enemy. But we're going to drop down the first hole to take a slightly easier path. Again, like I mentioned before, make sure that these water dead are being jump kicked if you don't have a weapon, because your range will not hit them and they will smack you down. This room has a few other actually, one-off enemies. We have these strange zombies and the necromancer, I think his name is. Possibly his name is like the Necro Lord. It's Necro something. Anyway, he's basically a mini-boss. He'll run back and forth across the screen, and if you let him scream, he'll reanimate all the zombies on the ground. Just chase him and hit him 6 times, and he'll be down. Finally, we come to another room with a bunch of boar worms. I strongly recommend staying at the far right side of the screen, and anytime that you see one of the boar worms spawn relatively in the center, be prepared to jump kick like that, or to duck down a few minutes and kick them when they get too close. I personally recommend experimenting a little bit when going through this maze area of the game. There may be a path that you find easier than I do. Normally I'd go across the top and just fight a bunch more mirror rigs. Now, something I'm surprised they didn't censor is this hideous transformation that your girlfriend Jennifer undertakes. This thing is frightening. This boss fight has 3 stages, and they all take 6 hits apiece. The first time, she'll make long jumps across the room, and I can just tend to stay in the corner and punch her when she's right over top of my head. Direct contact doesn't tend to hurt you. The second phase tends to have slightly shorter leaps, but if you run forward and punch her in the face real quick, she'll jump back just far enough to be out of reach of hitting you. Continue this until about 6 hits, and she'll go down for the count one more time. The final phase is actually the worst because she'll make tiny little hops across the room until she's just in range to hit you. I suggest pulling off the slide move, which should hit her twice, and then just wailing on her until she dies. Most times, there's a lot of unavoidable hits there. That was just a very good run. Normally I'd suggest sliding across the room back and forth. Once we've murdered our girlfriend, we're going to go into what is one of the weirdest levels of any video game ever, the womb of the house. Now here's another bit of censorship that I think was not taken correctly. So, a lot of people think that these enemies right here are just little bubbles that turn into goo men or something. But take a moment and pause the video. Just pause the video, look at one of the bubbles before I smack it, and tell me that's not a fetus. And I don't understand why they wouldn't censor you kicking fetuses to death when they censor religious imagery. And I think they just assumed that Americans wouldn't pay close enough attention to see that you are murdering these alien babies. Additionally, this is probably the hardest level in the game because there is absolutely zero pattern to how these things spawn. I suggest staying on the far right side of the room. If they land on the ground, they will turn into those goo monsters. Stand about lengths away from them and punch in the air. Do not duck and kick them. They will hurt you. If you're able to stay on the far side of the room, the enemies that spawn on the ceiling won't normally follow you. Instead, they'll move to the left. If you stay in the center of the room, they tend to follow you to the left. Once you get to the end, punch the womb about 50 times or so, and you'll be on to the next level. The entirety of level 7 is honestly just memorization. These logs come in a very specific pattern, and there's no enemies you can hurt. These fire dead, if you punch them, you will get hurt yourself. They also come in a very specific pattern, so with enough playthroughs, you'll learn the pattern just fine. You shouldn't get hurt at all. I say that, but in just a moment, I'm going to jump into a log. And of course, because you partnered up with a demon mask, he betrays you at the end and brings to life the final boss, whose name is Hell Chaos. The hardest part about this fight is the debris that falls from the sky. My suggestion is when he pops out of the ground, punch him 3 or 4 times, then run to the center of the screen, make sure you avoid the debris, get back in there, and smack him around. These hands that pop out of the ground are actually very easy to avoid. If you just stand still and jump straight up, they will normally go right underneath you. Every time Hell Chaos emerges from the ground, he takes 10 hits. After 10 hits, he will re-submerge. His hands will attack you 3 or 4 times, and then he'll come back out. He does this about 5 times for a total of 50 hits before he's dead. If you can afford it, I strongly suggest on the last time he emerges, just punch him until he finally dies. Once he does, the game is over, and you have survived Splatterhouse. The credit scroll for Splatterhouse is what I feel one of the most trolly credit scrolls ever. There's ridiculous names in here that make no sense, like Papaya that we just saw. One of the guys who does the sound is named just Joshua. Good old Josh from down the street. I believe the main music composer was Chopin. I feel like this is just another one of those carryovers from when game companies didn't want to give developers the proper credit they deserved for creating the games. So we have just a bunch of random names. But I feel like that can't be the case because there are very obviously some real names mixed in here. Now, I'm not sure if this is true for the PC Engine version of this game, but the original arcade version of the game ends with the mask cackling one last time before basically fading out. It's technically the final scare equivalent of a horror movie. And really that's what Splatterhouse does best, is capture the essence of horror movies. This is PsienceWins, and I'd like to thank you for watching Let's Play Splatterhouse, and I can't wait to see you next week.